Hi, my name is Evergreen, and I just love a new console generation. Nintendo, Microsoft, and Sony spend years developing their next generation of hardware, and with it comes new games and ideas that never could have been done before. Those games that release on day one set the stage for the next few years to come. Among these games, we have gotten some of the most beautiful, ambitious, genre-defining, if not industry-defining video games. And then other times, we get Knack. Sony unveiled the PlayStation 4 in February 2013. The PlayStation 3, though eventually successful, had a pretty rough lifespan, especially at the start. And it was important for Sony to show people that they had learned from their mistakes and prove why the PS4 was worth buying on day one. Knack was the very first PlayStation 4 exclusive revealed, and at the time, it felt like Sony was really pushing this little guy to be their next big franchise. Sony had a long history with platformers dating back to the PS1 era with the likes of Crash Bandicoot and Spyro the Dragon. It made sense that they would want another platforming Mascot at the forefront of their fourth home console. So how did the gaming world react? Well, Knack wasn't very well received on release, and the gaming community remembers it now as little more than a meme. I had never played the game due to the reception that it got, but I do remember keeping an eye on it before release because I've always loved platformers. So I decided to go back and give the game a fair shot and develop my own opinion. And you know what? After playing through the game, I can see where the developers were influenced by some of the greatest platformers of all time. You have the camera from Crash Bandicoot, you have the death animation from the LEGO franchise, and then you have the combat system from Super Mario 64. And when you put all these together, what you get is an identity crisis. The platforming elements in Knack are almost non-existent, and the platforming that is here is so trivial, it's hardly worth mentioning. The platforming sections are breathers between combat encounters, none of which last more than a few seconds and with very little variety in gameplay. Calling Knack a platformer is like calling Portal a first-person shooter. Despite being compared to so many other platformers, Knack is really a beat-em-up. Now, that's not a bad thing, but I do think a lot of people went into the game with the wrong impression the way the game was marketed. Many of the trailers before launch showed off the platforming as much or more than the combat, and the game's director, Mark Cerny, most often compared the game to Crash Bandicoot, but beyond the camera and a few short gameplay segments, the two games are nothing alike. Crash is all about jumping through an obstacle course-like environment to reach the end of a level, while Knack, on the other hand, is a lighthearted children's game about war. The story begins when a goblin army attacks a human military outpost, and, in an effort to fight back, the humans deploy this adorable little war machine, Knack. Knack was discovered by this guy, Dr. Vargas, and is made up of relics, these artifacts left over from some ancient civilization. Humans uncovered these relics and have been using them to power modern technologies, such as lights, doors, airships, and now they power Knack himself. As you progress through each level, Knack will collect more of these relics, which increases his health, his strength, and his size. You can play as Little Knack, Giant Knack, and then here's a chunky Knack going through puberty. Each level is broken up into little combat arenas, where you must defeat a group of enemies to open up the next arena. Between each battle, you may have to complete a short platforming section or watch a cutscene, and then you go right back into fighting. This is the basic gameplay loop of Knack, and while it isn't inherently bad, the game's pacing is terrible. Take Chapter 2-2, for example. It starts with a cutscene introducing us to the old Crag Mine, and then I go through these tunnels fighting fearsome goblins and bugs along the way. There's a brief cutscene introducing us to a new goblin enemy, and then we take this long tunnel to fight more goblins and bugs. After 2 quick battles, we get another brief cutscene and then fight a single bug before getting another cutscene. After 2 more goblin battles, we get a cutscene of Knack moving a tank, then fight another handful of battles before stopping to learn how doors work. After figuring this out, we fight a couple more battles, then stop yet again, this time so Dad can talk about our conception, and then it's off to fight more goblins. Without dying, this entire sequence takes under 10 minutes and contains more than half a dozen cutscenes. The combat rarely gets a chance to build momentum because these cutscenes constantly break up the combat encounters throughout the game. Even worse is how many of these cutscenes don't convey any meaningful information. Over and over again, I would finish a battle only to watch a 5-second cutscene of Knack running down a hallway or jumping off a cliff just to go into battle again. Occasionally I could move from one battle to the next without interruption, and honestly, these were probably the best parts of the game. But more often than not, the game just arbitrarily stops you so you can watch Knack do something basic. One level has this conveyor belt that Knack needs to move along, turning it into a brief platforming segment. Then you encounter the exact same setup 2 more times in the same level, except now they're cutscenes for some reason. Combat in Knack is very one-note. Pressing the square button is your basic attack, and you can press it 3 times for a combo. You can also jump and attack from the air. And there you go, that's 95% of the combat in the game. You do have another kind of attack, super moves. Throughout each level, you'll see these sunstone crystals, and by destroying them, Knack absorbs the energy within and is able to build it up and unleash it with great destructive force. There are 3 of these super moves: Shockwave, Storm, and a ranged projectile to hit faraway enemies. These attacks are fairly strong and very useful for the tougher battles in the game. The problem, however, is that it takes forever to build up enough sunstone energy to use them, so I might only use 2 or 3 super moves in a level, and the other 20 minutes I'm just mashing the square button. The real meat of the combat is in the enemy design. According to developers, there are about 100 different enemy types in the game, which is good because the combat is so basic and limited that the enemy variety is the only thing preventing the gameplay from being completely unbearable. Each enemy has their own attack patterns and timings that you must learn to dodge so that you can find an opening to attack. Mindlessly charging in will get you killed pretty quickly. You'll want to dodge either by jumping over the enemy attacks or by using this dash move. You can use this dash by flicking the right thumbstick, and Knack will quickly dodge in that direction. The game will slow down for certain enemy attacks, giving the player some extra time to react and dodge. But other than these situations, the dash just felt so awkward to use. Knack's movement right after dashing is sluggish, and the camera angle often made it difficult to tell if I missed my dash because I mistimed it or because I dodged in a bad direction. The dash was just too unreliable, so I found myself jumping to avoid the vast majority of attacks. But worse than that, despite the enemy variety, this game is incredibly repetitive. You'll encounter the same groups of enemies 3, 4, sometimes 5 times in a single level with no meaningful changes to the arena or to Knack's own combat abilities. In this level, after fighting 2 bats a couple of times, the devs mix it up by adding a 3rd. It's technically a different combat encounter, but functionally I'm doing the exact same thing as twice before. Combat often mixes in some platforming elements, such as having to climb a cliff while an archer shoots at you, and certain areas in the game will include environmental hazards, such as ice or mud, which affects Knack's movement by slowing him down, and that's really it. These hazards don't change how you avoid enemy attacks, it just means that it takes longer to get within attack range. A few levels later in the game had sections with falling platforms, and you had to navigate those while avoiding enemy attacks. I liked these sections, and I wish I had more to say about them, but that's about as complex as they get. The level design never evolves beyond anything basic, and never takes any risks, so while Knack doesn't do anything obnoxiously bad with its platforming, it also doesn't do anything particularly good or interesting. The game also has these weird, I don't know what to call them, puzzles, where the goal is to just hit all the switches in the room. I'm assuming the developers wanted to do more with this, but it just feels silly as is. There's one part of the game where the bad guys are trying to open this ancient door, and I just waltz in, slap a few levers, and the door opens like magic. I don't feel smart or accomplished by doing this, I just feel like the enemy is incompetent. Throughout the game, you can find a bunch of hidden gadgets, or rather, parts of gadgets. If you can find all the parts, you'll unlock a gadget that allows you to do something like build up extra sunstone energy, or slow down time, and they really spice up the gameplay. I assume. After completing my 11-hour playthrough, I had unlocked just one, and it wasn't until the end of the game, so I barely got to use it, and I'm really not sure how it changed things for me. I thought I found a decent number of collectibles while playing the game, but to only unlock one after 11 hours was confusing and disappointing. And apparently, it was intended. You see, every gadget part you find is randomly chosen, unless of course you have a friend who is also playing Knack. If your friend finds the secret room before you, you can then choose to take the same gadget part they did, or the one randomly chosen for you, making it much easier to complete gadgets. Alternatively, these parts and gadgets carry over to repeat playthroughs, so you can unlock more on your second or third playthrough. This is a baffling decision. The combat is so lacking as is, and to have all these gadgets locked away like this really helps set it up for failure. Also, all of the secrets in this game are hidden behind breakable walls. Just various kinds of breakable walls. Occasionally, these walls are off to the side, and that's about as clever as these secrets get. Even the original Super Mario Bros. Has more variety in how it hides its secrets. There's one mechanic I haven't talked much about: relics. I noted earlier that relics can be collected throughout each level to increase Knack's health, strength, and size, but I should clarify that is really more of a narrative element than it is a part of gameplay. You can find relic boxes hidden behind crumbling walls or apartment complexes, and they do increase your health. But you can just as easily skip these relic boxes with no problem at all. If you reach a part of the story where Knack is supposed to be the size of a building, you'll just be given all the relics that you need in a cutscene. If you reach a spot where Knack is supposed to be smaller, the devs put a door in front of you instead to take some relics away. The biggest flaw with this system, however, is that size doesn't matter. Giant Knack functions almost identically to Little Knack. He has all the same attacks and dies just as quickly. All Big Knack can do is talk.
Gentlemen, leave the rest to me.
Being a giant has some differences. You can throw tanks, which is cool, but the best part of being a giant is when you get to just run over your foes. You can literally trample goblins as they flee in fear for their lives, and it made me feel rather powerful and heroic. Also, for a children's game, this concept is kind of great. As a kid, I would have loved a game where I could turn into a giant and watch my enemies cower before me. That being said, this game needed more of that. Knack can also incorporate other objects into his body, such as ice crystals and firewood. The game doesn't really explain why he can do this. Knack can apparently just think hard enough to make it happen, but even worse is the fact that this doesn't change anything about the gameplay. You'd think Knack would get new attacks or abilities, but nope. Knack just gets a timer for how long he gets to use this extra health. The ice crystals will melt after so long in the sun, and for some reason wooden Knack is constantly on fire. Knack can also transfer his consciousness to this special type of crystal. This is Stealth Knack, and everybody can still see him. The only ability that you get from this is that you can now walk through laser beams, which allow you to hit a switch to turn off said laser beams. Fantastic. Stealth Knack has extremely low health, making combat slightly more risky, but most of these battles allow you to change back to regular Knack without issue. Honestly, these levels that mixed combat with platforming around the laser beams were pretty interesting, but like so much of this game, the idea isn't explored beyond a basic level. The level design as a whole is dreadfully uninspired. I already mentioned that the platforming is minimal and the secrets are hidden without an ounce of creativity, but beyond that, every level is just a series of hallways. Buildings and their gardens are made up of hallways. Mining tunnels and ancient ruins beneath the earth are just a series of hallways. The streets of a city is hallways. This cliffside is hallways. Look at this beautiful, lush forest of more hallways. I can think of just one level that actually tried something different and gave the player a more open space to explore, and the rest of the game is just a series of hallways with different coats of paint. Knack's problems, though, extend beyond just the gameplay and level design. I explained earlier how the combat is never given a chance to build momentum because of how many cutscenes interrupt the flow, but there's a similar issue with the narrative. The developers tried to tell large amounts of story in short cutscenes as though they were trying to keep the action going, but then the story doesn't get a chance to breathe and it suffers all the same for it. Take this scene from early in the game. Knack is trying to prove his combat capabilities by destroying a bunch of security robots when he accidentally breaks something important.
No! Charlotte. Sorry. Fight!
This is what I mean when I say the story isn't given enough room to breathe. We have no prior context for why this statue is so important to the Doctor. Knack's sorry is just comical, and then you immediately go right back into battle, a battle that isn't even narratively important. These pacing issues plague the entire game. Scenes play out as though they're supposed to be emotional, but without the context needed to make me care. It's like the developers wanted to tell an epic fantasy story in bite-sized chunks, and it just doesn't work. But even with proper pacing, it's hard to imagine this story would have come together nicely without extensive reworking. After the goblins wage war on humans at the start of the game, Knack and his friends set out on an expedition to discover where the goblins are getting their weapons from. In Chapter 2, the gang make their way through some woods where they find a goblin fortress. After scouting it out for roughly 30 seconds, our heroes decide to walk in through the front door of an enemy military outpost. During wartime, and surprise, they get captured. The writing in this game is all over the place. Sometimes it feels like the writers genuinely want to tell a touching tale, and other times it feels like the writers don't even know where we are.
There it is, our destination.
And then there are scenes like this.
Leave it!
No! It's all I've got!
There you go. See you at the top.
Wait, did he just fix that cliff by putting all the rocks back? But the story ends on a positive note. The bad guys are defeated, Knack and friends are celebrated as heroes, and Uncle Ryder walks peacefully into the night, carrying his ex-girlfriend whom he just saved after she attempted to kill us. That's kinda weird. Once you beat this mess of a game, you unlock a few more game modes. Chapter Select, Time Attack, Coliseum Attack, and the very hard difficulty. Chapter Select is exactly what it sounds like. It allows you to select and replay any level in the game. Time Attack is a series of 13 challenges for the player to complete within a time limit. There's not much more to say, it just drops you into a small section of the game and throws a 5-minute timer at you. You get a score at the end based on how quickly you beat the level, and bonus points for defeating enemies with super moves or beating the level without taking damage. It's not awful, but it doesn't really add much to the game either. Coliseum Attack pits you against waves of enemies and challenges you to complete all the rounds within 5 minutes. Unlike Time Attack, these battle arenas aren't ripped straight from the campaign. Like Time Attack, it's not very interesting. So Knack really isn't a good game, but remember, this was a PlayStation 4 launch title. Perhaps the most important thing is that this game got people excited for the upcoming console generation. Except it didn't. It's clear there are more assets on screen than your average PS3 or Xbox 360 game, and some particle effects stood out, but this game never really screamed next gen either. There are several moments where gameplay stutters, and then there are areas that look outright awful. There's one level late in the game that appears to take place in the middle of a dust storm, but it looked so bad that I genuinely had to stop to make sure my TV wasn't glitching out. The animation isn't bad though, for either the cinematics or the gameplay. In fact, because the combat is focused around avoiding enemy attacks before making your own move, it's really important that the enemies have nice, emphatic animations that let the player know what attack is coming, and for the most part, the game succeeds at that. Overall though, Knack is a game with a handful of neat ideas, none of which truly come to fruition. I think being a PlayStation 4 launch title really hurt the game. This needed another year or two in the oven before it was really ready to go. As it stands now, Knack is an action game where you'll take on humans, goblins, robots, bugs, tanks, and more, while exploring cities, forests, mountains, caves, and probably some other places I'm forgetting. It really is an epic adventure. On paper. On my hard drive, though, it's just a waste of space. Despite all its flaws, Knack does have its fans, including those that will adamantly defend the game as an underrated classic. And to them I say, if Knack is so great, why isn't there a Knack 2? Oh, Knack 2 was announced in December 2016 at Sony's PlayStation Experience event. And honestly? It looks good. This trailer was only a minute long, but it showed us several new game mechanics, new attacks, some actual platforming, and a new hover move that reminded me of the spin from Mario Galaxy. Knack 2 released in September 2017, nearly 4 years after the first, and when starting the game, the differences are immediately apparent. Graphically, the textures are more detailed, the frame rate is more consistent, and the animations, especially in cutscenes, can be quite beautiful at times. Maybe it's just because I'm coming off the first game, but oh my god, this looks so much better. Just look at their eyes, these characters feel so much more alive than they did before. Fundamentally, Knack 2 is the same game as before with one key difference. The game is finished. Combat still makes up the bulk of the game, but the developers reworked just about every mechanic from the previous game and made it clear early on that they've learned from their mistakes.
It's hard to believe you saved the world. All you know are 3 punches and a kick.
He can jump, too.
In addition to his triple punch, Knack now has the ability to kick either on the ground or in the air. You can also block projectiles, and if timed well, you can deflect ranged attacks back at enemies. And this is just to start with. As you progress, you will unlock more attacks and abilities. The heavy punch allows you to break through shields and armor, the boomerang is a ranged attack that can trap enemies in place, and the hookshot, a new ability typically used to reach faraway objects, can also grab enemies from far away and open them up to attack. All of these new attacks and abilities really help the combat feel fresh and varied throughout. Is a ranged enemy giving you trouble? The boomerang is great for stopping their attacks so you can deal with the rest. Or maybe you can use the hookshot to separate weaker enemies from the group, allowing you to safely take out one at a time. A tough fight in the original game usually meant that you needed to play more patiently and wait longer before you attack. Tough battles in Knack 2, on the other hand, tend to have a more proactive solution available, which makes the combat much more satisfying. The dash dodge is also fixed in this game. It not only does a better job of avoiding attacks, but over the course of the game you can also upgrade this move, allowing you to dash through an enemy, or to attack immediately after dashing, making the dash more than just a defensive tool. You can unlock different abilities and upgrades through this skill tree. By defeating enemies, smashing bugs, or by finding these glowing blue boxes, you collect experience points that you can use to buy new moves like the body slam or the rapid punch, or you can buff these moves by making them faster, stronger, or making them combo better. You start with just 1/4 of this skill tree, and once you complete it, you unlock the next quarter. There's no customization or character building involved, it's just a means of leveling up Knack and his abilities as you progress through the game. It's not amazing, but it gets the job done. And now after beating the game, you can carry over all these skills to New Game Plus, which is a nice way to increase the difficulty on repeat playthroughs without making the player start over entirely. Upon completing the game, I still had an entire section of the skill tree left to unlock, leaving room to continue upgrading Knack through New Game Plus. Gadgets have also been reworked to provide a similar sense of progression. Like the previous game, you'll find hidden collectible gadget parts throughout. Unlike the previous game, you'll actually be able to complete more than one in a single playthrough. While the gadget parts you find are still random and you can still get gadget parts that friends have collected, you can now also pick from items that famous explorers found here. Explorers like, Dirk. This system makes it much easier to complete gadgets, and because you can now complete several in a single playthrough, finding these secrets is satisfying and worthwhile. Over my 11-hour playthrough, I completed 6 gadgets, as opposed to the 1 gadget that I completed in the first game, and even better, these gadgets were useful. The Combo Meter gadget increases Knack's attack power for each hit he lands without being hit himself, while the scanner displays enemy health bars during battle. And then there's the Sunstone Bomb, which causes Sunstone crystals to explode when broken, causing a shockwave that can stun nearby enemies. These gadgets noticeably change up the gameplay and add another layer of progression to the combat system, and help to keep it fresh throughout. Super moves also make a return, but this time Knack only gets access to them when he comes across this Super Crystal. This crystal will appear for certain combat encounters, and when broken, Knack will become invincible and get a new, extra strong moveset. You can learn new super moves by finding these monuments hidden throughout the game, but you don't use super moves terribly often, so it doesn't feel all that special. Sunstone crystals can still be found throughout each level, but this time, filling the Sunstone meter creates a barrier that protects Knack from enemy attacks. The only reason I know this is because I read it in the Helps and Tips menu. During gameplay, I never noticed it. One of the few downgrades, in my opinion. The health system has also been reworked. Knack can now regenerate health mid-battle if he avoids taking damage. If you make a mistake, you can still recover from it, making the combat much less punishing, which feels like an appropriate change for this game. Knack can incorporate other materials into his body again, and this time icicles and metal parts will give Knack armor, which functions as a second health bar for the player. These materials also give Knack's new moves in combat or for solving puzzles. These mechanics aren't particularly complex, but they do give the gameplay some additional variety. Yet another improvement to the combat in Knack 2 is that now, unlike before, size matters. Whether Knack is tiny or giant still depends entirely on the needs of the story, but this time it also changes how you play the game. The bigger you are, the stronger your attacks and the longer your health bar, and this time the difference is pretty substantial. As a giant, Knack can take several hard hits while demolishing foes with little effort. When Knack is tiny though, he's pretty weak and fragile. Combat isn't worthwhile most of the time, and these levels instead play out like stealth or puzzle sections. A level may start out with you small and weak, sneaking past enemies to avoid conflict. Then, by the end of that level, you'll tower over those same enemies, merely stepping on them so you can focus on the colossal mechs attacking you instead. It takes the idea of Knack as a character made of relics and merges that with the gameplay in a way that's rather intuitive and engaging. It gives levels more distinct features and challenges, and it prevents the game from becoming monotonous. So clearly, the developers did a lot to make Knack 2 more enjoyable than its predecessor, but by far, the greatest improvement to this game is the level design and pacing. Knack 2 does a lot more to utilize 3D space and movement by emphasizing platforming, puzzle solving, and exploration more than the original. Levels are still linear, but include more hidden paths and open spaces to explore, making them come across like more real locations. Secrets are hidden in a wide variety of ways, and may actually require the player to complete a small challenge. Some levels start with 5 or 10 minutes of platforming and puzzle solving before you even get to the combat, and that's for the better. It makes these different game mechanics feel like part of the complete package instead of just filler content. And all these different parts of the game get to breathe. Combat isn't constantly interrupted by cutscenes, and platforming sections aren't just 5 seconds long. Low-intensity story moments have more puzzles and platforming, while high-intensity moments have more combat. The writing of this game is better than Knack 1. I still wouldn't call the story great, but the different story beats all get their chance to breathe, and it manages to tell a decent, coherent story. It also doesn't have any glaring flaws like, I don't know, ending with a main character walking through the moonlight with her ex-girlfriend after she tried to just murder us and take over the world. The writing is better than that, at least. The puzzles in this game are nothing to write home about, but they are actually puzzles this time around, which is pretty nice. The camera has improved too. The first game often shifted between different camera angles quickly and wildly. The camera moves better in Knack 2 as it follows Knack in turns without cutting more often, making it easier to move throughout each level. The camera is also better placed to hide secrets. Oftentimes you'll find a path just barely out of view. And then there's the music, which I haven't talked about at all for either game because it's all completely forgettable. The music is just there, it doesn't add to or take away from the experience. After playing through both games, the only music I can remember is the menu theme from the first game. I definitely think this is a missed opportunity, especially with Knack 2, where the developers tried to create some more cinematic set pieces, and I definitely think a more boastful soundtrack would have added a lot to that. Once you beat the game, you unlock some additional game modes just like before. Time Attack makes a return with a couple small additions to make it a lot more interesting. Defeating enemies in Time Attack will briefly freeze the timer, and so will running through these green rings. You also have these yellow rings that boost Knack forward at high speed. So while these levels are pulled straight from the campaign, you do have to play through these levels a bit differently to succeed, especially if you're going for 5 stars, which can require a bit of strategizing and optimization. Coliseum Attack also makes a return, but is rather plain in comparison. It's the same basic game mode as before. It's not bad, but it's not interesting either. And with that, my journey through the 2 Knack games was at an end, and what a roller coaster it was. Knack was unquestionably one of the worst games I have ever played in my life, while Knack 2, on the other hand, was pretty fun. I saw some neat ideas come out of Knack 1, and I mostly just felt like the game was wasted potential. Given enough time to flesh out the different ideas presented, it could have made a great game, and the sequel is proof of that. Knack 2 is a dramatic improvement over the first in almost every single way. Where the best part of Knack 1 was rolling the credits, the best part of Knack 2 was actually playing the game. Unfortunately, asking people to be excited for Knack 2 was probably too much to ask for. The first game sold a few million copies, so obviously people were interested in the concept, but the second game didn't make it to any top sales charts in any region. No matter how much the game improved on the original, it still has one fatal flaw. It's related to Knack 1. It's clear that the developers learned a lot from the development of Knack and applied it to the sequel. And honestly, I'm excited to see what lessons were learned from Knack 2 that can then be applied to the next game.
As for what comes next, who knows?
Well, that's unfortunate.